Okay, YouTube dudes. K1 says, Dr. No has a super tight script and is a great spy movie, but most of the Bond stuff hadn't been invented yet. A View to a Kill is a fun romp with all of the tropes, plus Walk-In and Mayday, but it's just Goldfinger with microchips. I see how they are contenders for this debate. Also, someone should drown all of Silicon Valley. It sucks that I had to say that because now this video's been banned. Thanks, K1. Murphy Chase says, I like both films a lot, but I'm going to have to go with Dr. No. I think A View to a Kill is super underrated, and it's got a lot of fantastic elements, but Dr. No is still just such a rock-solid and perfectly simple movie that, in my opinion, only a few Bond films have risen above. Yes. Alan Giles says, love them both, but I'd have to say Dr. No wins it for me. Simple story, but well told, and Connery nails the role from the word go. It's crazy seeing how much of the winning formula is there with the very first movie. I do think Dr. No himself is slightly overrated, though. I love A View to a Kill as well, especially for the villains. But Dr. No is just pure Bond, and it holds up incredibly well, and my opinion on it has never really dwindled. In the grand scheme of things, I would probably place it just outside of the top 10. Ethan Toyce? Dr. No is leagues better. A View to a Kill is good, but one of Moore's worst. A View to a Kill has bloated pacing issues, while if anything, Dr. No could have used an expansion on the final act if the budget were there. Rematch with the Dragon, Honey's Crab Torture, Obstacle Course, Bat Guano Mine, Giant Squid Fight from the novel. I'm reading it now. I haven't gotten to those things, but I'm suddenly really excited to read the book.
Just to point out, I don't know if we did talk about this, but the part with the crabs was intended to be filmed, and then there was an issue filming it. But that's
to his point. Like happening. If they were to make it now, it would probably have that.
Yeah.
Ethan continues. A View to a Kill, like The Man with the Golden Gun, chooses to focus more on the villains, although f***ing amazing protagonists, at the expense of Bond, while the few moments Bond does get are accredited to Moore's stuntmen, but that is more the editor's problem than it is Moore's age. A View to a Kill gets better as it goes. The Paris chase, horse race, conveyor belt fight, scuba scene lack fangs, while the PTS fire escape scene and everything following are top-tier Bond and a great send-off for Moore. The shotgun fight would have been my fave part if it weren't loaded with rock salt. I do not care about Moore's age and would not complain if he did one or two more, but you have to address it. Cut down on the crazy stunts and more Bond just wasting people a la Death Wish. Octopussy did this very well, which is true. I just really don't understand the hatred of the rock salt scene because that's part of Stacy. It's not like Bond pulled out a gun loaded with rock salt.
I think for me at least was that he gets shot with the villain or one of the henchmen gets shot with rock salt. We already see that they have guns. And I know you pointed this out. They're like, well, there's after Stacy. And I'm like, yeah, but there's another guy there now shooting the rock salt guns and has has the Walther PPK. And then he gets up and he's just like, I'm not dead. And then, the fact that you add that shot of him going, I'm not dead, that just adds to the goofy and silly and over the topness of the film.
Sure, but the guys were there just to intimidate her, not to murder them.
I don't care, but
it works
then
fine
you
for me.
have a guy with a gun, and it's like, well, then why aren't they using their weapons if this is what the scene is? And then it just becomes a scene of antics and him, be like, oh, I'm sorry, grandfather, and it's just silly.
No, she's a geologist. Rock salt makes sense, and she's not trying to hurt anybody. No, I won't shut up.
NaCl.
I don't hate these parts. I don't.
Sodium chloride. Okay.
That's the second worst thing you said tonight.
Continuing.
She's a geologist. Rock salt makes sense.
It does.
How about just rocks? Not even salt, just rocks.
Okay. Keep going. Sorry.
Moving to Reddit. Dominican Boy 02 says, I think Dr. No is the better film. I enjoy A View to a Kill as it is my guilty pleasure. Key phrase. But Dr. No is a solid film from start to finish that started it all. It's not played with any over-the-top moments or wacky gadgets. It's just pure spy espionage. True. A View to a Kill has its ups and downs, which makes it a fairly decent Bond film, in my opinion. I have it just about in the middle of my list. Bond 16 says, so since I've actually watched all your episodes and regularly commented on them, yes, Hi, I'm Nikolai. This is Nikolai Quack. What's up, Nikolai? Let me express how insane you are for even considering putting it above Dr. No. I mean, it's bad enough that by knowing your ranking, I know it's going to go above OHMSS if you're considering this, but Jesus Christ, man. We get it, Nikolai. You and McCurdy can off and go watch Secret Service and each other's dicks. Like, we get it. You want to put that at the top. It's fine. It's fine. But for the rest of us, it's like it failed to live up to what it wanted to do. I'm getting off topic. I love you, Nikolai. On a more serious, non-rant note, though, Dr. No is superior in so many ways. It doesn't have a bizarre horse plot that leads nowhere. We've been through this, though. The horse plot directly plugs into Zoran's backdrop, and it uses the microchips.
I haven't even touched on this, but he does make a point that the horse plot's like a thing that happens just to lead to like how does Zoran use the thing? Oh, it's a microchip. And you're like, oh,
it doesn't lead to the end of the movie or anything.
The only other thing is that, like, or at least the information that we get from that is that Zoran is paying off what's her face, and so we learn that new information, and then she becomes a part of the plot. But like outside of that, horse has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. It's just microchips.
It's the funding. It's a means to funding his operation.
He's the outstanding horse of the sales. He'll be shown last. We expect him to fetch over $3 million.
The discovery of the horses and how they're breeding the horses leads to Mortner, which literally leads to where he came from. Zoran is a horse, like figuratively speaking. He's one of Mortner's breeding horses.
I get that, but like a better movie would have led that to being like this is a part of the, like, I feel like the horse plot or how whatever he does with the horses, like, wouldn't that make me feel like, oh, well, maybe a part of his plan is creating super serums, like super soldiers or some kind of super serum, but we don't really get that. And that's where I'm like, there's something that could have been there. And I know, okay,
like instead of a Zeppelin, they should have, the horse race should have been the end of the movie instead of a Zeppelin.
Or something. But I'm just saying that, like, I know like the Marvel films have probably covered the super soldier serum, like, to death now. But like, there is that little bit of like, okay, we've done this thing to the horses, that we've made these really good horses, and we have this special device that we put in them and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that could have been used other parts of the film, and we just never saw that. Like, had Bond faced off against somebody who was just like an ordinary person, and all of a sudden now they're super strong.
Like,
and he's like,
Mortner at the end, like, pulls out the serum horse and like injects it into his neck, and then he's
something.
Like, I will avenge Max. Max. Yeah.
Something. You know what I mean? Like, it could have added to the film, and then the fact that you have his age lurking there too. I mean, like, I'm touching on things that is very much in the Captain America films. Yeah. But like, you could have alluded more to like, oh, Connery's old now, or not Connery, sorry. Moore is old now, and like he can't put up with these other guys.
Roger Moore injects himself with the serum, and then in the next movie he's Timothy Dalton.
Exactly.
I'm young again. Like every so often, the old Bond actor injects himself, and then suddenly he's replaced with a young actor. Now I'm Pierce Brosnan.
I will say that. I will say this. Saying it out loud does not help.
Okay. Nikolai continues, aka Bond 16. You've been doxxed, Nikolai. It doesn't have a Bond actor so old that he wouldn't do any of his own stunts anymore. The only solid thing it has going for itself are Mayday and Zoran, and that's just not enough. Sorry. Dr. No is a better movie and a better Bond movie. Totally can see that. Spockadile says, I still think Dr. No holds up as a better story. It's a little slower, as one might expect, given it was a low-budget movie in 1962 compared to an established adventure franchise in 1985. However, I kind of dig the slow detective-style writing. Generally, these are both movies that I've grown to appreciate more lately in different ways. Dr. No for a well-written spy adventure movie, and A View to a Kill for a wacky Roger Moore movie that's ripe for drinking games. Dr. No is 15 in my personal rankings. A View to a Kill is 17, so I understand how you think it's a tough call. ATW1221 says, Dr. No for sure. Sean Connery just personifies cool throughout the film, without a doubt. Dr. No himself is a top 5 villain for me, and other than the lack of gadgets, it's amazing how much of the Bond formula this first installment created. There's even a car chase with an explosive finish, which is goofy. I mean, it's like if that scene didn't have, I think they're on their way to a funeral. It would have been ridiculous. It's worth it for that moment. But like the first chase scene ever, they literally just turn off the road and immediately explode. And like whatever, but
because there's a thing in the way, and so he's able to navigate under.
He goes under it,
crane,
and they can't.
They're like, and then they turn.
It's like,
I'll give you that, because I was going to talk about it, and I was like, yeah, the chase scene's not the best in the Bond series, but it's like, again, I a little bit knowing the history behind the movie, I'm like, it's not a Spy Who Loved Me. They don't have a supercar.
Whatever.
They don't have the budget to afford this crazy chase scene, which I'm sure the chase scene in the car alone cost the same amount as the whole movie. For Dr. No. You know what I mean? So it's like, I was like, whatever. But again, like you said, the Connery looking over with that one-liner just...
Yeah. Without it would have been terrible. It made that scene.
It's those moments, though, that are throughout that movie that are... severely lacking.
Roger Moore doesn't have a Bond joke in this one. That breaks my heart.
Yeah.
So, okay. Anyway, he continues.
It's definitely lacking.
Yeah, he continues. A View to a Kill, on the other hand, has great villains and a good pre-title sequence, but otherwise is a real snooze. Stacey Sutton plays the most forgettable Bond girl in the series. Bond doesn't do much in the mines at all. Zorn kills most of his own henchmen. If you want to be objective about it, Dr. No is one of Connery's best performances. View to a Kill is one of Moore's lesser efforts. Zorn is a great villain, but Dr. No outdoes him. Again, that's like kind of our debate here. Honey Rider is one of the most recognizable characters in film, and certainly Bond movie history. Stacey Sutton is not. There's something I wanted to add to that. That's like an iconic argument.
Like, okay, but let me define something about iconic that we really have never touched on. And I think I kind of cemented in my mind when I was watching Dr. No. Because one of the things that really stuck out to me is how many times a character is introduced in Dr. No in such an image. Like, you're given an image when you see that character. Where A View to a Kill doesn't really do that at all. Like, we know who James Bond is by that point.
We don't have like a baccarat scene in a casino.
But like, if you you can like instantly, like, you're like, oh yeah, that. And that's kind of defining the iconicness of the films, but like, and that even goes double for Goldfinger, double for Oddjob. But like in Dr. No, the scene where we first introduce Sean Connery, that image, that clip of on Bond, James Bond, has been used like thousands, millions, billions of times. And not just that, but not just that scene. It's also like Honey Rider coming out of the water. She's given enough of a moment that it's like an indelible image in your head to be like, this is the character. And then we learn about that character. And like, we don't really get that in A View to a Kill at all. And even Dr. No gets that moment. Soren's like in a boat and he's like, Dr. No, it's like we lead up to seeing what Dr. No looks like for the first time. And even to like seeing his hands and we see his feet at first, and then we see his hands and we know his hands are deformed. And then finally we see his image and we're like, oh, this is Dr. No. They build that up. Whereas like Zorn, it's just like, this is Zorn, you know, same with Bond, same with Stacey. There's just nothing that really grabs your attention.
Well, I'm the guy who made the case that your Bond intro, there's so much you can do with that. And with this one, it's literally just like, oh, there's Bond. He's skiing.
Yeah. It's kind of like you're writing a paragraph and you don't, like, you might have this really well-written draft or a middle part of your body is like really great.
Yeah.
But like, there's no intro to it. It's like, here's my thoughts and then draft. And like, that's how I feel about A View to Kill.
But my whole thing is like, pretty much every movie has that Bond's in a casino gambling, and like, does every movie need to have that to be iconic? But then, I mean, the counter argument to that is like, well, Charlie, what's iconic about this movie? And it's like, I don't know, the Golden Gate Bridge.
Really. The Golden Gate Bridge thing is kind of like it's memorable at least. You're like, oh yeah, that was the one with the on the like. It's a good
like Mayday riding out and blowing up is like
that's
the
a good
movie
image
for me.
That's a good image too.
Yeah, it's great, but does it mean anyway? Okay, so moving ahead, Sneaky Bond says it depends on which criteria you're basing your rankings. If you're considering quality, I don't think A View to a Kill best Dr. No on any quality except for music and villains. Dr. No has a cooler Bond performance, stronger Bond girls, better locations and cinematography, a tighter story, and it isn't held back by any silliness besides the dragon. and a couple other things,
I would
but whatever.
make the argument though with the cinematography that's kind of an up in the air thing because as we've been talking about, like I can
Modernizing
see
and all that.
the modernization of the two films. Because even going back and watching Doctor No, I'm like, yeah, this film was made in 1962. Like it's very the way the lighting hits all the actors. It feels like it's been made on a stage, and even when they're on location, the lighting isn't the best. It doesn't really. It feels
they
like
do
they're on
day for
location.
night.
And
you
you
can't
can
even
see
see
you can see the
scenes,
cracks
like whatever.
too. Like you can see the moments where like a car passes by and the cameraman's there, or when he's in the phone booth. Like you see those little like you can know they're making this movie, but like that's where I'm like, I think A View to a Kill probably has better cinematography, but that also is years of filmmaking
after 14 films and it's just it is bigger. That again, it's like it's bigger. Is it better? That's what we're discussing. He continues, but if I'm in the mood for Bond, I'll choose to watch A View to a Kill more often. That's what I said, right? Like it's enjoyable. It may not be a better movie, but God damn it, I enjoy it more. In fact, I choose just about any Bond over Dr. No because each film does something more with the basic formula, whereas Dr. No simply establishes the formula and that's it. I guess that makes it less interesting, even if it is objectively better in quality. So if you were ranking the movies by watchability, A View to a Kill might prevail over Dr. No, but for me, I rank Dr. No at 13, while A View to a Kill is further down around 17 to 19. Spockadile responds with, this is a good take. I agree about choosing most over Dr. No based on entertainment value. Despite its silliness, I have a great time watching A View to a Kill, although I don't know if I agree Dr. No even established the formula. I think it simply laid the foundation for one formula used in Bond movies like From Russia with Love, OHMSS, and For Your Eyes Only, that more grounded spy story. The more traditional Bond formula I don't think was established until Goldfinger, as we talked about in depth, but I'm being very pedantic.
It's a solid take.
Don't shoot the food, says Dr. No all the way. I'm a huge fan of A View to a Kill. It was the first Bond film I saw in a theater. But Dr. No is a stunning achievement. Blowing it off because it's rudimentary is a mistake. Again, that's not calling it rudimentary isn't like blowing it off. It's just like calling it what it is. It should be endlessly praised for how it invented the Bond formula out of thin air. It has great sets, the unveiling of the score, a great opening titles, a supervillain, etc., but more than any of this, the line, that's a Smith & Wesson, and you've had your six, is probably the single best line in the entire series.
What keep up?
It's a Smith & Wesson, and you've had your six.
This is the big bang of the Bond universe and should be appreciated for this much more than it is. It baffles me that people downgrade this film because it's barely a Bond film or whatever. Stupefying, stupid statement. Again, for the millionth time, we're not saying it's bad because it's simple. The question is, does simple perfection trump something that's bigger and potentially better? And that's why this is such a hard decision. It's like downgrading our arguments by just saying that like it's simple, it's bad. Like none of us are saying that.
Scott, it's old and it's boring, like, McCurdy. Shut up.
We all fucking love every one of these movies. Except one or two. Anyway, the Phantom Stranger 07 says, I am going to dissent with popular opinion and place A View to a Kill above Dr. No. I believe that everyone has pointed out valid facts about both films, but I just lean a little more toward A View to a Kill in this case. As previously stated, Dr. No has a very straightforward and rudimentary plot, but there is nothing wrong with that. Amen. I will say that I find the good doctor a tad on the boring side for a Bond villain. I like the premise of a mystery man on a mystery island working for Spectre, but that is kind of where he loses it for me. He's a very, shall we say, hands-off, pun intended, villain for the most part, letting his henchmen and lackeys do most of the work. In fact, he has only a brief physical fight with 007 before meeting his demise. Also, I don't think that Dr. No was ever shown anywhere else but in his base on Crab Key, and I'm not sure that there is a real reason for that. Now, if you look at A View to a Kill, Zorn is shown out on location in several different areas, including San Francisco, the Kentucky Derby. It's not the Kentucky Derby. As Scott would say, you simple-minded the mine in Silicon Valley, etc. I will grant that he is also sort of hands-off as well, but at least he gets out of his house. True. I also feel like the Zorn character has more depth to him as well. Then there's Mayday. Mayday is a very interesting character as well. She kills for Zorin, as she is under the impression that he loves her, if he's even capable of that. But then, when the truth is brought to light, she makes a quick decision to sacrifice herself in order to derail his entire plan. I think even Bond was shocked when he realized what she was going to do. Yeah. I could go on, but allow me to wrap this up by saying that I give A View to a Kill the edge over Dr. No, and it is a close edge due to the characters having more depth. Plus, it gets extra points for Sir Godfrey. Lol. Yeah, and again, that's why we took a week off to reconvene now, because it's like, which is it? Like the Simple Perfection or like the 14th movie that's like big and has story? Alpesh AC says, comparison is the thief of joy, so quit it. And I basically told him to fuck off. Like, we're not stopping the show, Alpesh AC. We're only here to compare things. And that quote, comparison is the thief of joy. Comparison is the thief of joy is like us not comparing ourselves to Joe Rogan because Joe Rogan has 10 million followers. Like, It says nothing about meticulously comparing Bond movies until you puke or get really, really fucked up. Harm's Way says, it's just a matter of taste. But I think most people will put Dr. No higher, partly due to nostalgia. Yes. Dr. No started a film series, A View to a Kill ended Moore's tenure. Trying to put all that nostalgia aside, not an easy thing to do when talking about Dr. No, I'll still say that Dr. No is the better film. Both films have a solid narrative, but Dr. No has a better cast, especially a better Bond, and a few scenes that stand out more. A View to a Kill has a better soundtrack and more impressive action. The horse racing and the way it's integrated into the story is really clever. Again, I agree. But the film sort of runs out of steam once the setting is changed to San Francisco. Although it comes back to life when we are at the Golden Gate Bridge, but overall, I say Dr. No is a more even film. Sure. You should use tier rankings so you can get away from these impossible comparisons. 9! GM Dark says, hi, guy in his 60s here. So, older than Roger Moore. Okay, gotta be honest. Yeah. Gotta be honest, I've never particularly liked Dr. No. Sure, Connery never looked better, but so many of the things in it are not quite there. The Bond Connery plays in that one isn't the same guy he plays in the rest. He's very much a 50s idea of a great white savior throughout. Oh, God, we're bringing race into this. Barking orders out to the natives.
Jesus.
What?
Let's stop there. Let's not read the rest of that
Critical
comment.
race theory in the house. Shockingly, two-dimensional attitude towards women and anyone he considers socially beneath him. What fucking 60s era hippie? Is this George Lazenby? And the number of times he kills that poor defenseless tarantula. How many times does he whack that thing with his shoe? 10 minutes? Half an hour? Every time I see that scene, I'm obliged to point out, Jimbo, you got it first whack, mate. Fuck's sake, calm down. And then he hits it some more. My God, by the end, what could possibly be left to hit? What would you call that? A quantum of tarantula, possibly? Who the fuck is this? Connery's Bond is very, very different in his subsequent films. More egalitarian. Yeah, he's definitely more egalitarian. He hits men and women. Much easier to like. Yeah, in Dr. No, you do get that iconic, you guys drink for him. And you've had your 6 bit with Dent, but dear God, they guy literally just shot an unarmed, inexperienced geologist clearly out of his depth and crapping himself, who probably could have given up more information if only he wasn't quite as well ventilated as he ends up. I mean, Bond didn't need him anymore. I've always ranked Dr. No both first and last. Interesting. Is it better than A View to a Kill as a piece of cinema? Infinitely. Dr. No, worse than all, is at least the original Bond movie, and A View to a Kill, love it though I do, is a straight rehash of Goldfinger, not done with any of the panache of the original, and with a guy in the lead who was stiffer than my grandfather at the time he, bless him, my granddad passed away 6 years earlier. I love Roger Moore, he spelled Roger wrong. He's spelling a lot of things wrong. I love Roger Moore, I do, and A View to a Kill for me has always got its place, but as a movie, it's insignificant. Dr. No actually changed cinema. Sure. Cinema, I don't know, but like...
I would argue yes, and I could go on a rant on that, but he's right. It did. I mean, think of it like this way, like
what cinema?
So as much as
Star Wars did, like a blockbuster.
Think about it at the time. Like there was no what action series like today we have the Marvel films, right? Or superhero movies in general, right?
Yeah.
Like what series of films were there back in the 50s and 60s? You had westerns, and they were still popular up until the 50s, but there wasn't an action spy movie like Dr. No. And then when Dr. No hits the scene in 62, like that was like the spark off point when you had all these, again, like I talked kind of about this in Dr. No in some of the other films, but like because of Dr. No, you get all of this spy gambit, right? You get My Man Flint, you get Secret Agent Man, you get The Man from U.N.C.L.E., like you get all these Mission Impossible, all those television shows.
Yeah, sure. It changed. It birthed a genre, but it like changed filmmaking forever.
Maybe where spy movies went from there, but then you have North by Northwest.
When you think of, and again, like I've said this before too, is that
Thriller and spy had been there.
It birthed a genre is different from
to it though.
Star Wars changed cinema. It invented the blockbuster. I mean, Jaws, whatever. But like, Star Wars
created
films like it shifted the way movies were made. Versus, did Dr. No like?
I think it did. I mean, it did create like it was kind of the proto blockbuster of its time. Like it didn't. I mean, it made a lot of money for. I mean, we've talked about how much money they had to put into making that movie, but it definitely changed cinema for the better, I think, for creating the kind of characters and that kind of story. There wasn't really anything prior to that people you could latch onto. I mean, North by Northwest was there, but like most people kind of connect that with just Hitchcock doing Hitchcock films. I mean, this became its own thing, and it kind of
Psycho was like a prototypical blockbuster.
Psycho's
but
a
like,
proto to
I don't know about
like
Dr. No
slasher films. You know what I mean? But this also kind of goes back to why I always kind of say the first 6 films are the only real James Bond movies, because after that it's just like rehashing old ideas. Yeah. And this movie does that too.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. Of course.
So.
Okay. So he continues, as for Dr. No, loads wrong with it, and I don't tend to pop it in the Blu-ray player very often, but you have to give props to its place in the world. That movie put Bond on the cultural map. A lighthearted rehash of a much better film in the first place really doesn't, as enjoyable as I find View to a Kill to be. It is not in the same league of cinematic history, not remotely even close. Believe me, I do understand your sentiments here, but Dr. No is just one of those things you've just got to give it full props because it is the first Bond movie. That is actually reason enough. All the best with your tube thing. Let us know what you've decided.
Tube thing.
Your tube thing.
Your YouTube
The
thing.
YouTubes.
Your tube thing.
Yeah, the tube thing. I get it, but I've said from the get-go that I really don't like these arguments that require this outside knowledge. Now, I know, like, everybody knows Dr. No was a first movie, but if you were to watch these in a vacuum where you don't have that historical knowledge, you don't know what movie came first. So I just don't see that as grounds for it being better or worse. Knowing that they only had $1 million is outside knowledge that just watching the movie you would be unaware of. So I just don't like those arguments. It just reminds me of that god-awful moment in history when everybody was like, did you know Leo actually ate raw fish in The Revenant? That means he deserves an Oscar. And I'm like, yeah, but that movie sucks. I don't care what trivia you know about it, like how cold it was or how disgusting the fish was. The guy doesn't deserve an Oscar for rolling around on the ground for 3 hours and wheezing. But, once again, outside knowledge bleeding into how people are judging something rather than judging it on its own merits.